Good morning, Sunday school. Good morning. I've got to wait a second because something weird happened. I'm going to wait for everybody to click over on this side. So good morning, good morning, good morning. I see you all are joining. Thank you so much. Y'all know how I do on Sunday morning. You know I'm coming from one class to another. So I just left the fireside. All right. Yes. Hello, Sister Savadra's number one on take two. Good morning. All right. Oh, my folks are coming in. All my peeps, my TSSG peeps. We're 48 deep so far. Wonderful. Glad you all are here. Oh, thank you. Sister Grady made it back. I can see y'all's comments on the other side. Yes, I can see everything. Now I'm having to set everything back up here. The fireside was so good this morning. We've had a great time in Sunday school. I really have. I did radio this morning on KGGR in Dallas. And now I'm here with you all, and I'm excited about it. We have a great lesson. We're going to talk about the boy Jesus, and got a few questions and hope that we will enjoy our time together. I see Elder Kelly is in, so good morning to everyone. All right, let's pray and we'll get started. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for our life, our health, our strength. Thank you that you allow us just a fresh day to have a new opportunity to be your representatives for the kingdom. Thank you for new mercies. Thank you that this day has new possibilities. We thank you most of all for the day that we honor and reverence you. God, we reverence you every day, but God, the Sabbath day is something special for us because we actually carve out this space and dedicate this time to you because you are so deserving. You've been faithful to us as we've gone through our week. And this time for you is our reasonable service. God, we bless you. We honor you for this space to study your word, to be made better by your word. God, bless us today as we gather in this cyberspace. Allow your word to come alive in our lives. And most of all, give us the opportunity to grow in wisdom and to apply wisdom in our everyday lives. I pray that you'll bless every student, every person who's connected to this class, every person who will catch the replay, and even bless the services that will happen after our time in Sunday school that will gather in your name. We love you and give you glory in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty. All right. Thank y'all for flipping on over. I don't know what it is about me and YouTube, but I try to do the early thing so that you can tell that I'm coming on later. And when I went live, it was just, I don't know, it was weird. It was a glitch, but I'm glad that you're here. We're talking about the boy Jesus. Let me get my Bible back open again. Kind of closed it up from the first class. But an awesome lesson, very familiar to us, but also so much in here. We had a great time discussing it. And let me just give a disclaimer. I am not a parent, but I am America's auntie. I have two nieces and two nephews biologically, but I have godchildren that we cannot count. And so I enjoy being a part of a village to rear young people. And this this lesson has been a great one, talking with parents, especially about Jesus as a 12-year-old boy and what it's like when a child is lost and just kind of those feelings and emotions that have gone along with it. And so, again, we're talking about wisdom. And I believe that we're going to see wisdom in this lesson as we do read it. We're going to Ecclesiastes Chapter 3, verses 1 and 7, and then St. Luke Chapter 2, verses 39 through 52. I will read for you I'm going to choose the Amplified version from the commentary here. Ecclesiastes Chapter 3, verses 1 and 7. There is a season, a time appointed to everything, and a time for every delight and every event or purpose under heaven, a time to tear apart and a time to sow. Let's go to St. Luke Chapter 2, verses 39 through 52. And I'm sorry, there's more. A time to keep silent and a time to speak. That was the end of that. Now to St. Luke. And when they had done everything in connection with Jesus' birth, according to the law of the Lord, they went back to Galilee to their own city, Nazareth. And the child continued to grow and become strong in spirit, filled with wisdom and grace. Favor, spiritual blessings of God were upon him. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year for the Passover feast. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. And as they were returning to Nazareth after spending the required number of days at the feast, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem. Now his parents did not know this, but supposed him to be in the caravan and traveled a day's journey. And then they began searching anxiously for him among their relatives and acquaintances. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem looking for him everywhere. 3 days later, they found him in the court of the temple, sitting among the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. All who heard him were amazed by his intelligence and his understanding and his answers. And when they saw him, they were overwhelmed. And his mother said unto him, Son, why have you treated us like this? Listen, your father and I have been greatly distressed and anxiously looking for you. And he answered her, Why did you have to look for me? Did you not know that I had to be in my father's house? But they did not understand. They did not understand what he had said unto them. He went down to Nazareth with them, and he was continually submissive and obedient to them. And his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and men. That is our reading from the Amplified. And we'll have a couple of versions as we go through, because I actually did my notes in the King James. But I always think that it's interesting to hear the story read in a different light as we are looking at the boy Jesus. So I guess one of my first questions to you is, has anyone ever been lost before? Have you been lost as a child, or as a parent? Have you ever had a child that was lost? I'm interested to know that. And as a secondary question, I guess I kind of had two opening or icebreaker types of questions. If that doesn't apply to you, maybe you're someone like me who does not have biological children. I am curious about whether you have ever attended, or whether you had any customs around attending annual events, like an annual church event. And as you're answering, I will share, I guess on my other video, I talked about being lost as a child. So I will share that I am a part of the Church of God in Christ. And so my family, every year, there has never been a time that I have ever missed the Holy Convocation. And so my family has gone every year. It was always, I knew that I would miss a day and a half of school every year as a child. We left on Wednesdays, and Fridays were always a half day. I think there was Veterans Day or something on Monday. I don't remember, but day and a half of school, bring our homework. And there were just traditions that we had around traveling. There were several generations of my family that went together. My grandparents were there, my parents. It was great. We looked forward to that time together, and we would go for, 4 or 5 days as a family. So that's my family tradition in terms of traveling. And like the story today, it was my parents who took me, but also I look at the leadership largely of my father in making sure that our family kept that tradition of going to that meeting every year. I'm looking at your story. Sister Cheryl said you were lost for a whole day. Oh my goodness. Okay, Sister Laura Long says, yes, my son was lost in Super Walmart. I understand that. And y'all know Walmart, that's actually where the Amber Alert comes from. A child, I think, lost at a Walmart store. So even now today, right, we get these alerts on our phone. When your phone, you can be talking to someone and it'll just start buzzing. That's the Amber Alert, right? We get very serious about looking for children when they are lost. Let's see. Crystal Henry says, I was not physically lost, but mentally, and now I'm better. I understand that. Let's see here. Okay. Burnell Levinson says, you're always lost until you found the Lord. Thank you for that. My son was lost, but only for a few minutes in the department store. Rashandra Lake says she was frantic. I understand that. Brother Kevin, good morning. I've been lost in NYC as a child. Oh, wow. And I once lost my nephew in a museum in DC. Both of those are very big places in which to be lost. Sister Angela says, I lost my sister in the mall when I was younger. I found her in Sears. And they called Angela Bryant to customer service in Sears, please. Okay, so yes, that was what I shared with about my mom being called over the loudspeaker. Like, nobody wanted your mom's name. Like, when you heard your parents' names being called over the loudspeaker in Sears or J.C. Penney or Montgomery Ward, that was never anything good. That always meant somebody was lost. Well, in the children's video that I did this week, here was one of the things that I showed them. And I don't know that you all can see that. You probably can. But anyway, my family now uses an app. So as of right now, this is me down here in Texas. And I'm getting ready to see. My family is not lost this morning. Let's see where my brother is. Pastor Aaron is doing his service this morning from Zoom at home. Okay. And my mother is in Sunday school in Zoom, and I can see where they are today. And not only that, but I can even see that my mom's phone is charged to 64% and my brother to 83. And I only bring this up because today we use modern technology in such a way that we like to be able to find, whether it's our phone or find each other, we find ways to stay connected. But that was not the luxury that we find in this story this week with Mary and Joseph, as they have taken their child to an event and the boy Jesus is lost. When they leave, we'll get into that. He is lost. They don't have an app. They can't find him. He has no cell phone on 64%. As we're looking at this, I'm going to handle these scriptures kind of in a backwards way, because I think the meat of the story happens in St. Luke. And as we look at Luke, tell me what you know about Luke as a writer. Tell me what you know about the book of Luke, and who wrote the book of Luke. I know that you've studied this week. And so I'm still looking at your stories of being lost. Oh my goodness, LB Dawson lost a five-year-old in my city here in Dallas. Okay, so it's challenging when you lose a small child. Brother Kevin, this app would have gotten you in trouble. Let me tell you, there are days sometimes that my mother said, well, yeah, I saw you were so and so and so. And I'm like, how does she know that? She's in Kansas. And then I remember the app literally shows the movement. And when you zoom in on it, you can actually see the building that the person is in. So if I were to zoom in now, I could literally see my parents' house. And that's where my mother is. All right. The book of Luke, Sister Noreen, Shippy is about lost things. You are absolutely right. And in this week's lesson, we're looking at a lost child. It is about lost things. Elise Roll, the app is called Life 360. And your family you can create groups with your friends, with your families, anybody who wants to be together, and you can see each other. It's pretty nifty. But as Brother Kevin said, it's kind of stalkerish at the same time, but it's really great. All right. So it speaks, he speaks a nurse's language. So Luke was a physician. And so he does speak a different language. I think I mentioned last week that kind of depending on what your career or background or passion may be, that sort of comes out in how you process the world. And so Luke, as a physician, emphasizes the Son of Man, Sister Cheryl says. And he also, compared to the other synoptic writers, think about the level of detail that you expect your doctor to have. I don't just need to know I have a problem, but you need to detail for me what's wrong, what's the background, what do I do, and what is my prognosis. So we're used to that level of detail. And so we get that in Luke, which is really, really nice. Interesting as well, because we're talking about the boy Jesus. And I'm always kind of fascinated as we look at the life of Jesus. One thing we know is that he was fully God and yet fully human. And so he has a very earthly experience. But Luke is the only person who gives us this one peek into his life as a boy. We see his birth story. We see him, after the age of 30, doing miracle signs, wonders, being baptized, the sacrifice on the cross. But this is the only space that we get a peek into his life as a boy. Let's see here. Let's start at verse 39, and we'll do 39 and 40. In 39 and 40, it tells us that after they had performed all the things according to the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own city of Nazareth. And then the child is growing. He waxes strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God is upon him. Now, as you read in your daily readings this week, back up in chapter 2, you know that chapter 2 of Luke gives the birth story of Jesus Christ. So let's just go back and look at that for a bit, where Joseph has gone. He leaves his hometown. He has to go and participate in the census. And while he's gone, he has his wife with him, who is quite far along in her pregnancy. And of course, the baby is born while they're traveling in Bethlehem, and that is the baby Jesus. While they're there, of course, Herod is not happy that Jesus was born. And there's this decree out to kill all of the male baby children. And Joseph is warned of that in a dream. So instead of going home, he flees and takes his family into Egypt. And I'm always so impressed with the care and the leadership that Joseph showed with his family. And so he removes them out of harm's way and takes them into Egypt. Well, then after Herod dies, he's going to leave Egypt, and he's thinking it's time to go home. But he finds out Herod's son is on the throne now. So then he's like, maybe not, maybe I don't take him there. But then he is given the release and he takes his family into Nazareth. This is actually the fulfillment of prophecy as well, that Jesus would come out of Nazareth. So he's now there. And as we see here, this is kind of verses 39 and 40 sort of end what I'll consider the birth story and Jesus finally getting to Nazareth, which is where he will grow up. And so there's this kind of leap that happens between verses 40 and 41. And I hope you picked up on that. But we also see that, and good morning to everyone who is joined. Good morning. Sister Lilith Robertson says that Luke was a close friend of Paul. Thank you for that. Luke, okay, we see all the lost things that are mentioned. Thank you all for listing all the lost things. Luke draws the portrait of Jesus Christ, the Savior, who will bring the love of God to the earth. Absolutely. And in bringing the love of God to the earth, that's a great segue, Sister Shirley Ross, to this idea that his parents performed everything according to the law. So because he was the one who would bring the love of Christ to the earth, he would have to be perfect. So everything about him, even the way his parents followed all the customs they did, they were rule followers. That's what we decided in my first class. They followed every rule. So that included him being circumcised on the 8th day, the purification of Mary after he was born. This was the question I asked in my first class. To those of you who are moms, how long did you stay in after your babies were born? And I think the answer kind of changes depending on age brackets, but how long were you in after your children, your babies were born? How long did you stay in, or how long did they make you stay in? Now, again, I don't have children, but I've always 3 months, Sister Brenda says. All right. I've always heard this proverbial 6 weeks that mothers should stay in. And so this 6 weeks kind of relates back to the same 40 days that we're talking about with Mary. So if you ever wonder where that number came from, it's not an arbitrary number. It goes back to the law given back in Deuteronomy. So they've done everything they're supposed to do. Jesus has been dedicated, and now they've gone back to Nazareth, and Jesus makes progress. Again, a very earthly experience. And as you look at him as a child, he grew physically, he grew spiritually, he grew intellectually, and he grew in grace. So that is the growing in spirit, growing in wisdom, and God's grace was upon him. Now, last week we talked about John the Baptist. And when you read about John the Baptist, he grew and became stronger. Jesus grew and became stronger, but Jesus also grew in grace, and God's favor was upon him. So that's one of those differentiating things that we see, that Jesus is better. John was great. And remember last week, he kept saying, there's one coming that's after me, and I'm not even worthy to lace his sandals. There was always something greater about Jesus. Sister Noreen Shippey, thank you so much for being a blessing to the class this morning. Let's see here, 6 weeks. I see Sister Takora says 6 weeks. LB Dawson, 6 weeks. Teresa Wheaton, 6 weeks. All right, most of you did the 6 weeks. That's good. Oh, Sister Young, about 10 days. Okay. Sister Laura Long says I started back after 4 weeks. So yeah, there are ways that mothers want to be protective after they've had children, and we see that with Mary according to the custom. Let's look at verses 41 and 42, because this is where the action for this week's lesson kind of jumps in here, where the parents now have been, everything that they've done have been, it's all been about doing things the right way with Jesus, and certainly giving him the right experiences. And spiritually, this is really about his spiritual development. I see the investment, and I look a lot at how parents rear children today, and making sure that we don't send children to church. But here we see Mary and Joseph, who take Jesus to the Passover in Jerusalem, the feast that happens every year. And male children, according to Deuteronomy 16 and 16, if you look at that, the male children ages 13 and over were to celebrate 3 festivals annually. That was the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Festival of the Harvest, and the Festival of Shelters. And so they were required to attend. But notice at this point that Jesus is 12 years old. I have a 12-year-old niece. And I remember my nephew was a 12-year-old boy. 12-year-old boys are interesting. What do y'all know about 12-year-old boys? Yeah, you got some favorite 12-year-old boys? Shout out your favorite 12-year-old boys and tell me what you know about 12-year-old boys. Usually they are somewhere around the 6th or 7th grade. So I'm just imagining Jesus here, just call him a sixth grader in this text, and his parents take him to this festival or this feast of the Passover. It was about an 8-day feast held annually. And Mary was not required to go with her husband, but maybe, for whatever reason she chose to go. And I just kind of made a personal observation. I said, this was probably some wisdom, because I don't know that I would send my husband to an 8-day feast and not go with my husband. God bless women who are not able to travel with their husbands when they do annual things like conventions and things like that, because I just feel like that's a little wisdom. If you can get off work and you can be there, be by your husband. I don't have a husband yet, but he's not going to an 8-day convention by himself. That's my own wisdom right there. Let me keep moving here. Jesus was only about 12. He was 12 years old. And 12 was important because at 13, he would have been allowed to be a full member of the synagogue. He would have been considered a son of the law or a son of the commandment. And at that point, it would be kind of like a rite of passage. And so it's kind of what they call a bar mitzvah today, where he would have been able to understand the religious requirements and to participate in the public worship. And so he's at that transitional space and age. And again, I think it's so interesting that the father takes the interest in making sure that his son sees and understands and knows. And I watch that even today with young men in our church. I like to watch how fathers and uncles and pastoral leaders make sure that our young men understand the worship. Like, you can't wait till they're 13 and decide that they're going to suddenly love the church and love the things of the church and to know the customs. And so I think it's important to always make sure that you are training your children in that way. And so here, he's not quite old enough, but he's right at that age. Like, this year is going to be that pivotal time for him. Thank you so much, Sister Cheryl. And thank you, Adrian Shippey, for being a blessing to our Sunday school class offering this morning. I appreciate it. All right, 13 ASIMs. Thank you for that. We typically, and I wrote that down too, we call this the age of accountability. I know in my local church, even when we take communion, that is one of the stipulations. Pastor will ask families to sit together, to be together, and certainly for parents to make the decision about whether their children will participate in the communion. And typically we do ask that the child is 12 years old, unless the parent knows, that child understands everything that's going on and knows, that their child is responsible enough to participate in the communion service. I think that is interesting, because let me think about that, ASIMs. Thank you for that. That there is something interesting about knowing that you have a special kind of child. And I'll try to get to that as a question in just a bit. You all are telling me at 12 years old, Jesus would have been pretty familiar with the temple area, Sister Cheryl Powell. Elise Roll says, my son, they're very inquisitive. Sister Angela says, they're flexing, finding manhood. Absolutely. Oh, their voices change for sure. Sister Lilith Robertson, your two sons started checking out their manhood. Okay, I understand. 12-year-old boys are inquisitive and look to branch out just a bit. They push past those boundaries. So definitely a very transitional time, a time of accountability. And so I think it's important for us to see Jesus in this space. And we're going to see that it definitely, we see him coming into his own and in his own way, sort of asserting what manhood would be for him. And for him, manhood was about his assignment. His manhood was about his purpose, his destiny. And so we see all of that in here as well. Verse 43. When the Feast of the Passover was over, all the days are complete. They are now prepared to go home. And if we look at how they traveled, it tells us that Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph, his father, and Mary, his mother, didn't even know that he was still there. So the 8 days are over. They're preparing to go home. Everybody gets with their groups and they leave, but they don't realize that Jesus is not with the group. Why do you all believe that Mary and Joseph did not know that Jesus was with the group? What are the reasons that they possibly had no idea that Jesus was not with everybody else when they got ready to leave? I don't know about you all, but in my home, mother's rules were, when the car is moving, you need to be in the car. Now, I've never actually been personally left behind, but that kind of threat alone made me anxious about the idea of having to find my way home. I get it. I'm talking in modern context, and it's not like Jesus had a car. But what are those reasons that you think, or in your study that you found, that Jesus, his parents may not have realized that he was not with them? Let's talk about, while you're giving me those answers, I want you to keep in mind that at the Passover, the city of Jerusalem, I like the influx of people. That's why I kind of liken it to some of our church conventions. So if you go to the Baptist convention or the Church of God in Christ Holy Convocation, the PAW convention, you know that when we converge on those cities, like it's us, it's everything. It's the excitement of our services, day and night. There are musicals, events, training classes, and we're moving and we're going. A lot of us even have like the vendor areas, and we're shopping, we're meeting up with friends. It's a busy time. So I want you to think about the scene of the Passover sort of being as bustling with people in the synagogue and in the worship, and think about people, even vendors on the outside. Yes. Selling and making animals available for all kinds of things that would have been going on, and a lot of excitement. And now that is over. All right, you all are telling me that perhaps they didn't realize it because, let's see here, the answers are scrolling here. Sister Dolores, disrupted travel. When this camel goes up, you better be on it. I love it. That cracks me up, actually. All right. Let's see. With a large group of people, Sister Bernadette Ricks, good morning. With a large group of people, it is hard to keep up with the children. We had our children in bright yellow shirts with their names on them, so they stood out. That's huge. There were lots of people. And Sister Noreen Shippey, because there was a sense of family with everyone. Zora Michelle, they probably thought he was with the other family member. Like, oh, he's just playing with his cousins. Absolutely. I agree with that. They traveled in a kinship group, Ronzetta Brown. Absolutely. They traveled in caravans. So correct that we would have been in groups. And when you're with a group, your trusted village is what I call them. There's kind of this sense of safety that you feel inside of your trusted village. And so I agree that maybe it's the idea that Jesus, he's probably playing with his cousins. He's probably at the back. He's with the group because surely he knows that when the camel is moving, you need to be with the camel. So surely he's paid attention and he sees that we're moving. Jesus could have traveled with the men or the women. One parent may have thought he was with the other. So what Sister Dolores Tyson is explaining is, if you think about this caravan moving, you're moving with your group, your village, your group of kinship. Well, the women and children are said to have walked up front and the men walked behind. Maybe that was a safety thing, but can't you see this now? If dad is in the back with the men and mom is in the front with the women and children, and he's 12, then Joseph is thinking, oh, he's with his mama. And maybe on the other hand, Mary's thinking, oh, he's back there with his dad. You know, he hangs out with his dad all the time. You know, that's just what they do. And so they get a distance off and they don't realize that he is not with either one of them. I also thought it was interesting because I think some children, depending on how mature we think they are, they're able to go off and to be with friends or to play with cousins. And it made me think about it, because if I don't trust you, I won't even let you go off and play with your friends and cousins. You'll play where I can see you. Made me think about, like, last year at our church convention in Tampa, it was the first time my brother and sister-in-law allowed my nephew to sort of do his thing. He was 14 years old and he was allowed for the first time to go off with friends. And what do I mean? It was like, okay, when we meet in the morning, we meet at 11 o'clock. And while classes are going on, you know, hey, here's your whatever money you get for the day. Here's your money, you know, enjoy. You guys go to class, do your thing. But at 1 o'clock or 1:30, here, be back at this place in the convention center or be here in the hotel, whatever it was kind of their time. And it was the first time that he was at the age to have that kind of independence. So I kind of saw, you know, who knows, maybe the text doesn't tell us that, but maybe it was the first time Jesus got a little bit of freedom. Remember, he's 12 years old. But again, when you're in this company of trusted family and friends, I think there's something to be said about that. So as you all are sharing that with me, then this is my question for you. We clearly have identified that having a village, in their case, it was a caravan, but for us, today it means that there is something still important about having a village or a trusted community. So I am curious, Who is a part of your trusted community or your village? And how did you identify the people who make up that village? And if you're still developing that, like what's important to you as you figure out who's in that community? Maybe you're building that out now for your family, or you're building that out now for your young people. But how are you identifying those people? Who is in it? And how do you identify those people? Now, we've already said, and many of you have mentioned that in this case, and I'm watching for your answers, that it was largely their family and their acquaintances. And I know that in my experience, that typically has been a part of my village. In fact, that is one of the things that I most connect with my home in Kansas City versus where I am now, is really this idea. I have an amazing village in terms of my church family and all, but when I think about Kansas City, not only was there the church village, but because we went to school together and our parents worked together, there was just kind of this interesting concept of who was the village around us and how children were reared. And here I don't have that same kind of connection. Even the way we knew our neighbors, like here, I know who they are. But if I had children, I can't overly tell you that in the same ways that I went to Mr. and Mrs. Manning's house next door, I don't necessarily have that same kind of village feeling and relationship. So I do pay attention to who's in the village. Let me see what you all are saying. Let's see here. Oh, good morning, Sister Dorsey, and to the Murrays. I'm glad you all are here. Sister Cheryl says, my best friend. We have kindred spirits and similar values. That's important. The spirit of people and their values. So when you think about this idea of village and how we apply that today, so of course, some of us will say, when I was younger, if I got in trouble at church, Sister so-and-so could, say something to me, and man, if my mom found out I got in trouble at home again. But part of that had to do with a common or shared sense of value and knowing that we trusted one another. Let's see here. The people who make up your village are your parents and your family members. Thank you, Crystal Henry. You trust people who share your philosophy, Sister Laura Long. I agree with that. Mostly your church family, but people that are living holy, Sister Wheaton, because of the fruit that they produce. And I think that is so important. Look at how they're living. Look at what's coming out of where they are. I think that's important. Growing up, we may involve family from a village, but to a village of other believers who have shared and similar values. I think we're all agreeing that it has to do with values and fruit and having that shared sense of community. Sister Mildred Stover, thank you so much for being a blessing to our class this morning. All right, so I think I'm still reading your comments, and we're all agreeing about how we create a trusted community and a village. And I think that's important, especially when you have children. We have to know that children are going to be influenced by someone somewhere. And so I think it's important as I look at this, yes, he gets left behind, but look at where his parents had him. They had him in the midst of family and friends and faith. And so here, even in a space where he gets separated, he's in a space that his parents have determined was a good place for him to be. So that was interesting for me. Verses 44 and 45. This is what I call kind of a moment of tension. This caravan has now been gone for a full day, and now mom and dad realize he's not with anybody. Mary, he's not with you? No, you was daddy. I thought he was back there with you. I mean, what? I didn't know. Last time I saw him, he was with you. Last time I saw him, he was my brother so-and-so. So I just assumed he was with the men. And there's this moment of tension when they realize that Jesus is not there. They've been moving for a whole day, approximately 20 miles, and no one realized that he wasn't there. Thank you, Brother Kevin Riggs and Sister Mia Washington, for your kindness. And thank you for sharing this time of studying the word with us and your leadership. I appreciate it. And as they realized he's not gone, this kind of, and I told you, familiar stories, you have to watch them because you don't want to just read them like, oh, I know what happened. Jesus got lost. No, I paid attention to the detail in this. Jesus was missing and they got up in arms about it. So yes, we're talking about his natural parents, but as I look at the application of that, we've got to be careful when we, for whatever reason, realize that Jesus is missing. And I think that can happen sometimes when we get moving and things are in the hustle and bustle and we're going on and a day has gone by or a couple days have gone by and we realize, whoa, Jesus isn't as close to me as he was before. And when I looked at the response of his parents, yes, they're his natural parents, but I think that our response has to be the same, that we've got to first become concerned. Because some people, it doesn't bother them that Jesus wasn't around. But for his parents, they were concerned, and then they put in work. They exhausted every single effort to go and to find Jesus. So that was one of my questions. Sometimes it's possible for us to get caught up in the movement, caught up in our own beat of life, our habits, and not realize that Jesus is not with us. He's not right. Whoa, I kind of took my eye off. I took my eye off of Jesus, and we are not as close as we were. So how do you respond when you realize maybe you're not as close as you should be to Jesus? That's the question. While you're answering that, I notice here that not only did they become concerned, they put in work, but they don't give up. They look among their family and friends, and they're thinking that maybe he's just somewhere in the group. He's somewhere in the crowd. But when he's not there, they don't stop with being satisfied with that. They know it is a long journey back. They spent almost a day looking among family and friends. Now they start the journey back, and they go back to Jerusalem, which is the last place they saw him. Sometimes when you lose a thing, you need to go back to the last place that you had it. Go back to the last place you had it. Verses 46 and 47. 3 days later, and how interesting that Jesus is associated with 3 days. 3 days later, his parents find him. I'm reading your comments here. All right. Wise men and women still seek him. Absolutely. How do you find Jesus? More prayer time, repentance, and going back. And I see a question here. Weezy Lee says, what made them look in the temple? I think very practically, it is where they left him. It was where you last saw him. And that's why I asked the question, where do you need to go back to? Where is the last place that you saw Jesus? And for his parents, it was in the temple. And so these are earthly parents. And I think I asked you, parents, have you lost a child before? Any parent who has lost a child in that moment, it is unnerving. It is what's going on. I just saw them. A parent shared a story this morning when the child was younger. She said they were in Walmart and she didn't hear him say, I'm going to the restroom. And when she turned around and couldn't find him, her only son, she was frantic. Where is he? She's looked through all the clothes. She's gone everywhere. She said she stopped a man and said, excuse me, sir, I need you to come do me a favor. Can you go in that restroom and see if you just call my son's name out? But for whatever reason, she could not find this child. And a few minutes later, he came and he looked at her and he's like, what? And he said, I told you I was going to the restroom. But for that mother, in those moments that she was separated, not knowing what happened, and your mind goes through all of the craziness. We don't see that, but you see that a mother and father are now going back. So we have to know that they're concerned. They want to find their child. And let's see here. It's a loss of peace. Okay. Welcome, Sister Marilyn, first timer. You all say hello. You all are doing that already. Don't you love this community? They see you're new. Welcome. Let's see. Mary and Jesus took Joseph to the temple for ceremony redemption for the firstborn. All right. I'm still reading your comments. All right. So they go back to the temple. And when they get there, verse 46 says, 3 days later, they found him right where he had been before, in the temple, sitting in the midst of doctors, both hearing them and asking questions. Remember, we're talking about a sixth grader, a 12-year-old boy who they find, and they don't know what's going on, and they don't know what they're going to walk up on. That is one of the unfortunate things. That's why you see those movies or TV shows like 48 Hours. When somebody is missing, the first 48 are going to be pretty important. So we're past the first 48. We're into 72. Who knows what they would go back and find. But when they walk in, what they see is their sixth grader, their 12-year-old, sitting in the temple, in the middle of really smart people, in the middle of other adults, asking them questions. He is talking to doctors, to leaders, to scholars, and he is able to hold conversation with them. And they are amazed by what he's saying. They are astonished at his understanding and his answers. There are a few things I want to talk about in here. Parents. At what age, if you have a child that you identified that there was something special about your child, what did you identify and at what age? At what age? When did you know that? When did you see it? What did you see? And then I'll also ask you as a parent, how have you nurtured that? How have you dealt with that? Because here's Mary and Joseph, and they've always known on some level, right? From the very beginning, an angel tells you that you're pregnant and you know you haven't been with anybody. Angel tells you that you're going to bear the Son of God. So you've always known that there was something different about this child. They knew that they were cultivating a gift in the world, and yet going through this very human experience, here's this moment where he is astonishing everyone. He is, let's see here, Lisa Jackson is astonished to the doctors as opposed to the priests or other believers. And I think our translations kind of depend on that. You may see some other titles used, but I am with you. But really what I looked at that as being is very learned people and adults. Like this idea that a 12-year-old was completely captivating and captivated by adults was very fascinating to me. Let's see here. I'm still watching for your answers. Thank you, Sister Simmons. I appreciate you being here with us. Okay, you all are still answering about finding Jesus. Okay, so he's here with these people in the temple, these adults. And one thing I noticed here is the language says that he was hearing and asking questions. So I can imagine, I see conversation, but I clued in on that hearing and asking questions because we're talking about wisdom. And I believe that this is a space that we should pay attention even to how Jesus learned that there was wisdom and he asked questions. So often we do a lot of this. We want to be the ones talking, but we don't slow down enough for listening, hearing, and asking questions. And you can learn a lot more by asking questions and a lot more by observing sometimes than you can by doing a lot of this. So I believe that there is a wisdom nugget that we can see in here. I also noted that he is fully God, yet fully man. And so in this moment, in his fully man space, there are still things that he needs to learn. So I see here again his wisdom, and I note that children can have wisdom. Children can have wisdom. We see that in the person of Jesus. And so he is listening, he's asking questions. And it also made me think about the value of the voices of children. And so often, and I'm going to ask you that, how do you encourage the voices of children in your church, in your space, in your community? Because I think a lot of times children are shut down, right? You know, I get it. We have the idea of the kids' table and you don't participate in grown folks' business. I got all that. But at the same time, how do we listen to and how do we value the voices of children? Because children, quite often, they see things. They're intuitive. They have a lot to offer. They can help us sometimes, even while they're learning. They can be a great benefit to us. And here's Jesus. And you're right, Mary is, Sister Brenda says, she's focused on one thing. She has found her son. After 3 days of looking, he is here amidst all these smart people. He's amazing. Jesus is amazing. He is amazing. Everyone who sees him. I'm trying to read your comments, and I'm also looking at the time. Let's see here. Yeah, Sister Teresa says, my youngest daughter was always different, even in childhood. No one was stranger to her, always uplifting others. Just a blessing. Wow, that's nice. Let's see any other children's comments here. Parents with special children. Jesus listened and had comprehension. Children can be spiritual. Absolutely, Sister Dolores Tyson. Children can be spiritual. Children can operate in wisdom. He was fully God, and yet in the season he was a 12-year-old boy, Sister Cheryl. That's why I love Sister Sunday School, Sister Jacqueline Brooks, that we can listen and ask questions. I agree. Sister Sandra says, my daughter was about 8 when I noticed a gift for colors and putting them together. Now she's a clothing stylist. She loves putting clothing together and puts clothes on people. I always encourage her to explore color. I appreciate that because I kind of laugh about like kids. My brother was one of these kids, you know, boys, if they are musically inclined, it is not uncommon. Like he used to go pull out the pots and pans underneath the cabinetry. And on the one hand, it would drive mom nuts. On the other hand, he turned out to be a pretty decent drummer as a kid. And so there are gifts that we have to learn to cultivate. And sometimes we'll see things, and instead of becoming necessarily frustrated, we might need to see the gift in it. I used to say that about my nephew. He's almost 16, but as a kid, he would just find things and take them apart. And again, on one hand, boy, what are you doing? But on the other hand, his mind, he's math and science intuitive. So now we're talking to him about and having him to explore careers in engineering, where you can take things apart, put them together, and we will pay you handsomely to do that. So again, children have value, and I see so much of that with this 12-year-old boy in the temple who is able to engage with adults. I also noticed this. Jesus was amazed and astonished with their answers as well. He was captivated by what they were saying. He understood, and he continued to ask questions. Now, this said this to me: your mom and dad can only give you so much. And moms and dads, I think you need to keep that in mind. So that's why I think this idea of village and who you keep around and what environments you put your child in, they matter, because Jesus couldn't get everything that he would need for his assignment, destiny, call, purpose. It didn't all come from his parents. In this moment, he is gaining from the wisdom of the doctors and the leaders in the temple. There were some things that his mom and dad just could not give him. And so he was learning and absorbing in that moment. He's like a sponge here. And in verses 48 through 50, when they saw him, his parents, as his mother saw him, they were amazed. But we're still in this moment of tension where a lost mother finally lays eyes on her child. And even though he is in the temple, and you know what? Yeah, I kind of laughed at Jesus a little bit, because I used to kind of have these, y'all gonna laugh at me a little bit. I used to have these feelings of, I wasn't a child who got in trouble for like doing like crazy things. And I always felt like, I got in trouble for like minor stuff, meaning you didn't wash the dishes last night. Oh, okay. Is that why I'm in trouble? And so at least if I'm gonna get in trouble, man, I got in trouble because I'm hanging out in church with the doctors asking questions. I kind of felt like Jesus in that moment, but he's amazing them, and she's upset. And even though, yeah, he's at the church, he's at the temple, you weren't where you were supposed to be. And she is such a mom at this point. She has kind of a mini mom meltdown, and you can feel her frustration. And she questions Jesus. She asked him a question, and her question was, why have you dealt with us like this? Why did you have your father and I sorrowing like this? In that moment, it just kind of all explodes for her. She's, I'm sure, relieved that he's there. But like any mother, what was wrong with you? What, didn't you see the caravan moving? Why didn't you get up and come with the rest of us? And Jesus responds to her. He responds, and he has a duty to respond to her because that is his mother, right? So even though he is fully God and he knows his assignment, his call, his purpose, his destiny, at that moment, he's a 12-year-old boy who has a mother who's asking him a question, and he responds. And you would think that as a 12-year-old, he would be kind of aware of the drama that he's caused and be like, hey, I didn't mean to call her. I'm really sorry, but no. In that moment, his deity and his sovereignty, we talked about that transitional space with 12-year-old boys kind of coming into manhood and kind of asserting their own. And his asserting here was more asserting his deity and his sovereignty. And it is on display in that moment. He has this sense of identity and purpose and calling. And his answer was not, I'm sorry. His answer was, why are you looking for me like this? Why were you all worked up? Don't you remember what this arrangement is? You do remember this is just kind of like a little thing, and my father has called me to a bigger assignment. And he's explaining, it's almost a rebuke in a sense. Where did you think I'd be? I'm in my father's house. I'm in the space where I feel comfortable. I'm at home here. You brought me here, and this felt like where I should be. And this is a huge moment because he goes on to say, didn't you know I had to be about my father's business? Now here's Joseph standing right here. And I'm sure he's like, well, what am I, chopped liver? And not only that, but Mary has said, your father and I were concerned. And he's almost like, my father in heaven has called me to something much bigger. So again, Jesus has this moment that is a huge moment. And I also know here that it made me think about the fact that Jesus doesn't ask for permission to stay behind, right? When he stays in the temple, he didn't ask anybody's permission, because if he had asked his mom and dad for permission to, it's like starting a behavior that you're not going to be able to continue. That's the best way I can describe it. And in terms of his call, his assignment, his destiny, from that moment on, there would always be things that Jesus wouldn't be able to come back and get a permission slip for every time. Being fully God meant that there were going to be things that even to his death, like his mother would never have signed a permit. Mom, can I have your permission to go out here and get beat? And they're going to put me on a cross later today. I just need you to sign. No. At this point, he understands where life is taking him, and there would be things that his parents would not be able to co-sign or give a permission slip. And so his call was to something higher. So in that moment, that's how he answers her. And then verses 51, where's the belt? The lost son and the found Messiah is what Sanford Johnson says. Let's see here. Jesus knew his mission. You're not the belt, Brother Kevin. There's a sense of connection with his heavenly Father being in the and he's so comfortable in his Father's house. And we can be comfortable in our Father's house. He went down with them, and he came to Nazareth, and he was subject unto them. Let me make, can you all still hear me? That was actually my AirPod. Can you all still hear me? He goes down in verses 51 and 52. You can't hear me. You cannot hear me. Okay. Let's see here. Make sure